If you tuned out from listening to news since Friday, catch up fast. Here are all the top local stories since Friday in one video, minus all the storm coverage, which is over. 29-year-old Caleb Andrew Werner of Bemidji is facing charges related to child sex. According to court documents, on January 13th, a Bemidji detective began investigating an allegation of criminal sexual conduct between Werner and an 8-year-old female. The child victim reported Werner told her she would get prizes and free stuff if she got on her knees while he did a bad private thing. The complaint also states that Werner made it the child watch dirty videos while wearing her mother's thong underwear and made her look at exposed parts of his genitals. And a 2-year-old also reported sexual misconduct to the mother. During an interview with investigators, Werner indicated he is bisexual and dresses in women's clothing in private. Werner denied doing anything inappropriate to the 2-year-old. And according to court records, the 8-year-old's phone had child porn on it. Caleb Werner has been charged with felony solicit child through electronic communication to engage in sexual conduct and gross misdemeanor indecent exposure in the presence of a minor under 16. 66-year-old Stephen Ani has been found guilty of manslaughter in Walsh County in the shooting death of his daughter, 36-year-old Stephanie Ani. A sentencing date has not been scheduled yet. The charge carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. For background on this story, here's our original reporting that was published on May 2nd of 2019. The original charge of murder was reduced to manslaughter. 65-year-old Stephen Ani has been charged with murder in the death of his daughter. This is quoting directly from the criminal complaint that was just filed. The Walsh County Sheriff's Office received a report of an incident that occurred at a rural Adams residence that was located within Walsh County yesterday morning. The affidavit was dispatched to the rural Adams residence for a suicidal male, Stephen Ani, that had a firearm in his hand. Your affidavit arrived on the scene and saw Stephen Ani's vehicle, a 94 white Chevrolet pickup, wasn't parked in the driveway. Your affidavit attempted to use the patrol car's external loudspeaker to call Stephen Ani out of the residence, but it was malfunctioning. Your affidavit then blasted the loud audible horn to let Stephen Ani know that law enforcement was present but had negative contact. Then the officer went into the west door, knocked, and announced several times. They could hear movement within the house. Around the fifth attempt to get Stephen Ani to open the door opened slightly. Officers saw a black reflective object in Stephen Ani's right hand, and part of his face was exposed. Stephen Ani immediately slammed the door, and the officer went for cover. Ani then reopened the door, and the officer could clearly see Ani was holding a cell phone, and he was talking to someone. Stephen Ani told the person on the phone that was on the phone with him, "They're here to arrest me." The officer escorted Stephen Ani to the patrol car and asked Stephen Ani what had him so upset today, and he stated that he was tired of his kids leeching off him. The officer asked Stephen Ani who was currently living with him, and he stated Jane Doe and another family member. Stephen Ani told the officer that he wanted them out of his residence. The officer asked Ani if he intended to hurt himself today, and he stated no. The officer asked Steve Ani if there were any guns in the residence, and he stated no. Stephen Ani asked the officer if he was going to arrest him. During the investigation, the officer was informed Jane Doe, who was at First Care Hospital with an apparent gunshot wound to her abdomen. Jane Doe succumbed to her injuries while at the hospital. The officer then read Steve Ani his Miranda warning and asked him if he was willing to talk. Steve Ani then stated, "So, you're arresting me?" And I told Ani that he wasn't under arrest at this time and that the officer just wanted to ask him a couple of questions. The officer asked Steve Ani when he last saw Jane Doe, and he stated at approximately 9 a.m. Ani told the officer that Jane Doe was transported by a family member to the city of Park River. A family member of Steve Ani arrived at the residence. The family member told the officer after they spoke with Steve Ani at approximately 10:35 a.m. Steve Ani told him that he had punched or shoved Jane Doe in the stomach. The family member stated
that what Steve Ani had said didn't make much sense. A family member was interviewed at First Care Hospital, and the officer was advised there was an altercation within the residence between Steve Ani and Jane Doe. The family member stated that she was inside the bedroom of the residence with the door closed. The family member stated she heard a loud sound of a pop. The family member described the pop sound being that of a pellet gun, or like a 22 caliber pistol being discharged. The family member exited the bedroom and saw Jane Doe downstairs leaning over the kitchen table. Jane Doe told the family member, "Take me to the Park River. It's serious and it hurts." The officer was advised. Steve Ani's demeanor changed instantly as he was in disbelief about what had happened. Steve Ani told the family member to take his pickup and bring Jane Doe to the hospital. The officer was also advised that they were the only three people inside the residence at the time of the altercation. The officer placed Steve Ani under arrest, and he was transported to Walsh County Correctional Facility.
Now, again, on this Friday, January 17th, the Walsh County jury has found Stephen Ani guilty of manslaughter. He'll be sentenced at a later date. 35-year-old Kathleen Thureen of Moorhead has been charged with stealing nearly $100,000 from Fargo Billiards and Gastropub. According to court documents, an investigation showed the thefts occurred between August of 2016 and May of 2018. $96,000 is missing. Thureen allegedly tied credit cards to the business accounts. Owner Michael Page says he did not know Thureen. Page says there were 3 to 4 transactions a day, amounting to $100 to $120 apiece, dating back to August of 2016. Thureen told investigators she was in a desperate financial situation at the time and was being selfish by allowing her bills to be paid by the victim's accounts. Kathleen Thureen has been charged with felony theft of property. 37-year-old Mark Larry Shaver of Mentor, Minnesota, is facing 9 felony charges following an incident in that town. According to the court documents, on January 14th at 11 p.m., deputies responded to Mentor for a report that Shaver had broken into a woman's home. Deputies were advised that Shaver had picked up 2 knives and was making threatening comments, and a woman and 2 children were in the home. The woman and 1 child exited the residence when a deputy showed up on the scene and went to the deputy's car. The deputy made contact with Shaver in a kitchen doorway, and Shaver had a large butcher knife in his hand, allegedly, telling deputies he did not want to go back to jail, and the only way he was leaving the residence was, quote, in a bloody body bag, unquote. Shaver wound up putting down the knife and was arrested without further incident. A child had remained in the home. Shaver was out of jail on conditions of release for another charge with previous convictions for assault, violation of a domestic abuse, and no contact order. He's now been charged with 9 felony counts, 6 variations of a felony burglary charge, plus a pattern of stalking charge, and 2 violation of a domestic order no contact charges, which includes possession of a dangerous weapon. 22-year-old Ian Sargent of Bagley, Minnesota, is now the suspect in a stolen vehicle case in what might be considered not the smartest alleged criminal move. According to court records, on January 3rd, a Clearwater County deputy was dispatched to a resident by Rice Lake, southwest of Bagley. The female victim reported Sargent had been in her residence, and when she woke up, her car was gone, a 2016 blue Chevy Cruze. Well, what Sargent apparently didn't know, the car was equipped with OnStar, a device that lets them quickly locate the exact location of a vehicle. The deputy called OnStar, and the stolen car, along with Ian Sargent, were quickly located in Detroit Lakes, where Sargent was arrested. 60-year-old Michael Dean Lostilla, address listed as the Care and Share Mission in Crookston, is facing criminal charges. According to court records, on January 16th, Crookston police were dispatched to the Care and Share for a report of a sexual assault. Lostilla allegedly grabbed a man around the neck and put him in a headlock, and kept bothering a female victim, allegedly at one point groping her breast. Michael Lostilla has been charged with felony assault, 2 counts, and gross misdemeanor, fifth-degree criminal sexual conduct, non-consensual sex. Listilla has previous convictions of interference with a 911 call and domestic assault in Otter Tail County. 57-year-old Charles Hill of Grand Forks is facing more drugs and a weapons charge. According to court records, on January 15th at 11:19 p.m., he was pulled over on South Washington Street for an outstanding warrant. A search allegedly found a syringe, a open bottle of Fireball cinnamon whiskey, a machete knife, and 3.5 grams of meth. Charles Hill has been charged with felonies of possession of meth and possession of drug paraphernalia, both of them second or subsequent offenses, and a misdemeanor charge of carrying a concealed weapon. We had a report of an injury from a fight at a downtown Crookston bar early Sunday morning. Here's the emergency calls that came in at 1:54 a.m. on this Sunday.
Crookston area ambulance respond to Crooks Club 223 North Main for a party who's fallen, hit his head, apparently is bleeding from the head. There would be a party that's been involved in a fight. So law enforcement has been dispatched and just stand by until they ensure scene safety.
Again, a report of a person injured in a fight. We'll have an update if and when any criminal charges are filed. A snowmobile driver was killed Saturday at 5:48 p.m. when he was struck by a pickup in Aitkin County at the intersection of Highway 169 and 610th Street south of Grand Rapids. Deceased is 56-year-old Kyle Hegna of Chaska, Minnesota. The patrol says alcohol was involved in the crash. The driver of the pickup was 37-year-old Aaron Horner of Palisade, Minnesota. He was not injured and no alcohol involved. The patrol says the snowmobile driver, Hegna, was attempting to cross Highway 169 at 610th Street when he was struck by the pickup traveling southbound on Highway 169. 31-year-old Marcus Guevara of Crookston has now been charged in connection to an incident on New Year's Eve. According to court records, on December 31st, Crookston police responded to 187 Hurlbut Street. A female reported Guevara had kicked and damaged her door, mailbox, and car. It was a rental residence, and Elite Property Management estimated repair costs to the door at $1,602. Marcus Guevara has been charged with felony criminal damage to property. 44-year-old Anthony Volpe of Crookston is facing criminal charges following a January 15th traffic stop. According to court records, he was pulled over for expired license tabs and had an outstanding warrant and previous convictions. A search allegedly found meth. Anthony Volpe has been charged with felony, possession of meth in a prohibited zone, and gross misdemeanor, driving while impaired. Crookston High School graduate Kurt Rungen was killed in an avalanche on Wednesday while snowmobiling in Sawtooth National Forest in the Baker Creek drainage approximately a half-mile northeast of Baker Lake, Idaho. Rungen was one of two snowmobilers caught in the avalanche near an elevation of 9,000 feet. One of the riders escaped the avalanche, located Rungen, who was buried by snow, and removed snow from Rungen's face. The partner and a professional rescue personnel were unable to revive him. Rungen is survived by his wife Ann Pell and 3 children. The Blaine County Sheriff's Office released this news release. January 15th at approximately 3:30 p.m., Blaine County Emergency Communications received a report of an avalanche with snowmobilers possibly injured in the Baker Creek area, approximately 20 miles north of Ketchum. Blaine County Sheriff, Search and Rescue, and Sun Valley Fire, Ketchum Fire Department, and Ambulance, Wood River Rescue, and Sun Valley Ski were dispatched. Deputies were able to determine that 2 people were riding snowmobiles in the area of the trailhead at the end of Baker Creek Road when the slide occurred. After the slide, one of the riders began looking for the second rider. Kirk Douglas Rungen, age 50, of Jerome, Idaho, was located by his transponder, but was unable to be revived and passed away at the scene. The Sawtooth Avalanche Center will be investigating the technical aspects of the slide. Initial reports indicate that a slab avalanche failed on a wind-loaded southwestern slope near 9,000 feet. Avalanche conditions for this zone were rated as considerable on Wednesday. Neil Carlson for iNewZ.TV.